your presence. We know many members are joining as we speak, and there were a few challenges with members registering and accessing their personal links, but that has been resolved. We await a few more members, and then we will officially kick off in a minute or two. Thank you for coming on board, and we look forward to an engaging activity this morning and afternoon. Thank you.
All right, good morning, everyone, and I hope I can be heard. Someone, please confirm to me if I can be heard. Thank you.
Yes, we can hear you, Mahad.
Okay, Mr. Donald Massa, our convener, you are trying to communicate to me. However, your network, I think, is having a problem and you are so much breaking. I request someone else to confirm to me if I can be heard before I get started.
You are clear, sir. Please proceed.
Okay, that is really awesome. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure having you once again, and we cannot be thankful enough. Thank you very much. Firstly, we thank you all that this comes from the organizing committee of the Jumuiya Debate Open. We thank you all for gracing this tournament, giving it your all and giving it and making it the best tournament in the region, that is East Africa and South of Africa. You have given this your all, and for us and from us, it's an extreme pleasure that we can never thank you enough for. And to the adjudicators who have come with us all this way, much as it's not yet time for me to say that we've done it to the best, but I think for now you have given your best, and we shall always be grateful to the participants and to everyone, to the organizing committee. Yes, it has been a very long and beautiful walk. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we've come to the evening of the tournament, which is actually the climax of the tournament that makes it much more better. And this tournament was aimed to end at this particular time, at this particular day, that is the International Youth Day. Without much time to waste, because we have so much to do even after this tournament. The day is very long, as you're all aware that the closing ceremony shall be with ActionAid, and the day will end at close to 17 hours. Allow me take us direct to our program of the day, being that give us speech, and the convener is Mr. Donald Massa, who will give us a speech for 5 minutes. Mr. Donald Massa, it has been a privilege working with you, and please take the floor. Ladies and gentlemen, as Mr. Donald Massa is coming, I should inform you that he is the convener of the Jumuiya Open 2021. So, Mr. Donald Massa, it is a privilege and it is an honor having you.
Thank you very much, Mahad. Can you hear me?
Yes, please.
All right. Thank you, Mahad. I'd also like to inform the members that Mr. Mahad Bariamujura is our head of protocol for the Jumuiya Debate Open 2021 and also doubles as the chair of the Uganda Debate President's Council. So we're also happy to have you. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to this finals event of the Jumuiya Debate Open 2021. My name is Donald Massa, and I've had the privilege of serving as the convener for this edition of the Jumuiya Debate Open. The Jumuiya Debate Open is a debate sorry for my interruption. It's geared towards nurturing leadership, good governance, and promoting intellectually guided debate in Africa. The theme for this year's edition of the tournament is Young People at Crossroads, Realizing the Right to Adequate Food and Decent Living Amidst COVID-19 and Climate Change. It is inspired by the theme for this year's International Youth Day, Transforming Food Systems, Youth Innovation for Human and Planetary Health, and is centered on discussions on the right to food, COVID-19, and climate change, with a particular emphasis on how these issues affect young people and how they can collectively be addressed. This tournament is co-organized by the Uganda University Debate President's Council and Vijana 256, a Ugandan youth civic organization with support from the ActionAid global platform chapters in Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, and Zimbabwe, and was held virtually on Discord and now today on Zoom from the 7th to the 12th of August, which is today. I am delighted to report that this has been arguably one of, if not the largest, debate tournament across Eastern and Southern Africa this year. We know that many tournaments were affected by the COVID pandemic and were unable to happen, such as the East African Universities Debate Championship and several others. We are privileged that Jumuiya is able to continue happening even amidst the disruptions that have been occasioned by the coronavirus pandemic. We registered over 100 debate teams this year, 50 adjudicators, and dozens of participants in the poetry and public speaking tracks, hailing from Uganda, Kenya,
Mr. Massa, Mr. Convener, allow me interrupt a little. You are okay. You are breaking, and the moment I be away, yes, now I can hear you. Please proceed.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you. As I was saying, our aim is to grow this to become a truly Pan-African debate tournament that is able to convene and bring together young thinkers and debaters from across the continent and also beyond to discuss the key issues, key policy and issues of public concern of the times. We'd like to particularly thank our judges who came all the way from Kenya, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, and Uganda, both for the debate, poetry, and public speaking tracks. We'd also like to thank our participants who came from these aforementioned countries, but some from other countries, Rwanda, South Sudan, a few from West Africa, and others overseas who were able to participate in a number of challenges affecting participation in the tournament. One of those challenges was being access to data. We know that because this is an online tournament, access to data is quite expensive, and many people have challenges accessing it. Even when you're able to access data, depending on where you are, it's not stable or consistent. And I'd like to thank all of you who have stood with us until the very end that we are arriving at amidst all the challenges. I'd like to report that this has been a successful tournament by and large. We were able to accomplish nearly all of the goals we set ourselves as the organizing committee. But like with all tournaments and activities, there are always shortcomings. And I'd like, on behalf of the organizing committee, to take responsibility for any shortcomings that might have come out of this tournament, and to guarantee and promise that we will continue to do better as we move forward, and also to invite all of you who have participated in this tournament and many others further afield to look forward to and participate in next year's edition of Jumuiya 2022. We will still be here, and we've set ourselves a target of being one of the preeminent debate experiences on the continent, and we look forward to your participation going forward. And we also thank you for your participation. Finally, I'd like, in a very special way, to thank our partners who have stood with us since last year and have made this tournament possible. Even though this tournament is run online, it is not run without resources. We need resources to facilitate our adjudicators, our volunteers, and also to ensure that our participants are able to access the data to take part in the tournament. So we'd like to thank ActionAid, Global Platform Uganda, Kenya, Tanzania, Zimbabwe for their generosity in making this activity possible. We do not take it for granted, and we know that many organizations have the resources but have not considered funding such worthy activities. So we thank you very much and look forward to your partnership as we go on. One of the participants has said, if at least it can be physical next year. Yes, we also hope it will be physical. And once everything clears up, we very much look forward to hosting a physical tournament where we can see you all physically and interact with you. And we know the experience is much richer in person. We know that the time was not adequate to train everyone, and we will come up with a plan going forward to make sure that all participants are adequately trained in all the tracks so that their participation in the tournament can be enriching, and fulfilling. Once again, thank you very much for walking with us along this journey. I'd like to wish you a very happy International Youth Day, and to the debaters, speakers, and poets who have made it to the finals, may the best teams, may the best team, may the best speakers, may the best poets win. Thank you, and enjoy today's event.
All right, thank you very much, Mr. Donald Massa. He is a lawyer and he is the head of Vijana 256. He is part of the organizing committee of the Jumuiya 2021 edition, and he serves as the convener. It was a pleasure working with you, Mr. Massa, and having you as our convener. All right, we shall be going to the most exciting thing now, what everyone is awaiting for, that is welcoming the Chief Adjudicator to give us a brief on and also release the motion for the final. I understand the Chief Adjudicator had initially sent apologies of getting caught up, and she had delegated. I will request the Deputy Chief Adjudicator who was delegated to unmute and perform the duties as delegated. Okay, just to repeat, the Chief Adjudicator had sent in apologies that she would not be able to make it on time. However, she will be joining us shortly and had delegated her duties in this meeting to a Deputy Chief Adjudicator, and to my communication earlier, it was Mr. Fred Odhiambo. I would request that you unmute and perform the duties as delegated by the Chief Adjudicator. Kindly do so. We are against time.
Hello everyone. Actually, it was not me, it was Dalitso, but he's sorting some few issues on with data, and he'll be joining us. So I think if it would be okay if you guys give us a 2 to 3 minutes so that he can sort the issue he's having on his end, so that he can join and carry on. Is that okay?
It leaves us with no option, but okay, we shall be proceeding to.
Thank you.
We
Thank
would
you.
have been proceeding with poetry and public speech, which I believe poetry and public speech. Therefore, we shall be requesting the adjudicator, the Chief Adjudicator for poetry and public speech, to unmute himself and give a brief and release the topics at issue for the finals. Kindly do so. I realize the all right, without wasting time, I realize the Deputy Chief Adjudicator to whom the delegation was made has joined us just now, and I request him to unmute himself, perform the duties as delegated by the Chief Adjudicator. You will be required to give a short brief and as well declare or announce the motion for the finals. Kindly do so as we are against time.
Hi, good morning to everyone. Sorry for the delay. I was facing some technical challenges. Am I audible? Could I kindly get a response as to whether or not I'm audible?
Yes, you
You're
are.
audible,
Please
sir.
proceed.
Am I audible?
Daliso,
Yes.
you are audible. Please proceed.
All right, thanks. So the tournament so far has had 7 preliminary rounds with topics all focusing and engaging on aspects pertaining to food security, climate change, policies, and youth inclusivity in terms of political activism. We also had an extra round, which was a master's round done by very renowned speakers in the circuit. And the master round was basically a demonstration of how debate was supposed to be. The master round was focused on the aspect of youth and how liberal ideas are shifting African societies in relation to, and we have rounds being also the semi-finals that were also focusing on the themed topics of food security, climate change, deniers, and policy implementation in regards to which policies would be best to be utilized. Of course, during the tournament, we did have a few. I think people are still getting used to the new technological systems pertaining to things like Discord, how to use it, how to check in, and network availability, issues pertaining to time. But regardless of all of these, on average, we had about 12 to 13 rooms a day, of that being 8 speakers, 2 judges. So it was quite a large turnout, actually, a consistent turnout. So that's something that we greatly valued. And the semi-finals being yesterday concluded, the break to the finals was announced this morning. So that means that this morning we will be moving on to the debate finals. And from the debate side, I think a lot of teams have learned a lot, have been engaging. We've had a lot of interesting ideas. And one particular aspect of this tournament that has also been beneficial is that it questions a lot of issues that people don't normally think about, because very few youth are engaged in issues pertaining to climate change. Very few people knew what food security systems were before they had to debate a motion with the definition of that, or how food security might be impacting people even within their own countries, and what kind of possible solutions can be driven towards those aspects. So in total, we've had 9 rounds, well, 10 rounds, the master's round, 7 rounds preliminaries, and then 2 out rounds. And today is the 11th round, being the final. And the topics have been themed. I'm pretty sure there will be a collection of all the motions that we've had so far. We've had motion feedback as well from the speakers, just to hear their thoughts on how they found the motions, which motions were difficult, which motions they feel perhaps needed more explanation because of limited general knowledge. So we've had that feedback as well. We've had positive feedback from speakers talking about how they've developed some of their speaking skills. We've had consistent adjudicators as well. So I think they've played a large role in ensuring that everything happens smoothly, because debates can't necessarily happen without the assistance of their adjudicators. So in brief, I think in the beginning, it was still a bit of a chaotic mess, because everyone was getting used to the technology, everyone was getting used to the system, and people were still trying to negotiate their way around debates. But beyond that, I think from day 3 moving forward, things have been running rather
But
smoothly.
I think you are being low and less audible.
Sorry, am I audible now? Let me
Yes,
speak
you are.
closer to the
Yeah.
microphone.
Sure.
Oh, all right. So no, I was saying that in general, in the beginning, it was a really tough challenge, especially because of people not really remaining online, because it's an online tournament. When people commit and they disappear, it's really becomes problematic to try and adapt to the situation from a technological point of view. But after that, when we got a consistent following, and I think once people understood the system and got used to it, everything from there moving forward ran smoothly. I remember particularly on day 3, when I asked the judges if their rooms were having any problems, and they all responded, everything was fine. It's a good sign to we've adapted and moving forward. So I think the adjudicators also played a large role in ensuring that everything was consistent. I'm not sure if there are any particular questions on any aspects that anyone would like to ask.
Unfortunately, sir, time is not really enabling us to go into so much of the questioning, but I will request that you declare the motion and we listen to the next speaker, who will be the Chief Adjudicator of Public Speech and Poetry. So as Mr. Daliso will be declaring the motion for the finals, we shall be expecting to listen from the Chief Adjudicator of Poetry and Public Speech, and that shall be specifically for 3 minutes. So Mr. Daliso, back to you, sir.
All right, so the finals motion comes with an info slide, and I hope the teams are present. If not, I will forward it to the group as well and announce that preparation time has started. I think some of the teams were having challenges logging into the Zoom meeting. So the motion for finals comes with an info slide. Anthropocentrism, in its original connotation in environmental ethics, is the belief that value is human-centered and that all other beings are means to an end. Thus, anthropocentrism views can be and often have been used to justify unlimited violence against the non-human world. In light of this, there has been a rise in youth-led environmental activism groups that have been trying to raise awareness of the harms of this attitude. The motion reads, this House believes that anthropocentrism is justified. Once again, the finals motion with an info slide reads, this House believes that anthropocentrism is justified, and it is 20 to 8, I believe, East African time. So 20 to 9, sorry, East African time. So teams will have about 15 minutes to prep before we get the round started. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, sir. It was a privilege and pleasure listening from you. And with that, the high for the debaters who are going for the final round. We still have here a very few minutes. We get concluding and we shall be going in for the climax or final round of this debate tournament. Allow me at this moment that I recognize the presence of the Chief Adjudicator. Molly has just joined us. However, allow me invite the Chief Adjudicator in charge of poetry and public speech to come and give us a brief in exactly 3 minutes, not more than that. You're welcome. Kindly unmute yourself. Then next we shall be listening from the manager of the Global Platform Uganda, Mr. Primus Bahija Atkwase is with us in this meeting. We shall listen to him, and after listening to him, we shall be going in for our final round. So please, let's listen to the Chief Adjudicator in charge of poetry and public speech. Kindly unmute yourself.
Hello. I'm audible enough. I am facing an issue with my network. Am I audible?
Yes, sir, we can hear you.
Okay,
Yes,
thank
sir,
you very much. My name is Adungo Oniogo David, privileged to be the Chief Adjudicator for Jumuiya Open Public Speaking and Poetry track. Well, to start with, I would want to recognize the presence of everyone who has made it to this meeting. It is not easy to wake up very early in the morning and find yourself in a meeting, more so if it is not on your daily schedule, but well, here we are. Say that thank you very much for the organizers of this particular one goes for a tournament in my or that mentality, but it has kept me going and it has kept me learning from everyone and everything that is around me. With that being said, the poetry track has been concluded. We were unable to have the finals via Zoom, but the finals were held yesterday via WhatsApp. Though the winners have not yet been announced, which will be happening on Zoom. Right now, the public speaking track is ongoing and submissions are via WhatsApp. And at exactly 11:30, the results will be ready with the adjudicators are deliberating on the top 3 best speakers. For poetry, we had 6 finalists, and we will recognize the best 3. And for public speaking, we also had 6 finalists, and we will recognize the best 3. So we did have a number of issues being raised, the participants, and so on. But yeah, we were able to deal with it. This being an online tournament, as one of the deputy CS said, it is quite challenging, very challenging for people to be in time, to roll call in time, and ensure that they are participating in time. Some of them were also having issues with the tasks that were being given. Yeah, the tasks were very much helpful as far as getting their minds so clear. Allow me to end here by saying together we can make a better place. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, sir. It was a pleasure listening from you, and he has emphasized finals for poetry were done yesterday, and currently and ongoing, we're having finals for the public speech docket. Ladies and gentlemen, before we go into for the finals of the debate, which is the climax of this tournament, let us listen from Mr. Primus Vahiji, who as well serves as the manager of the Global Platforms Uganda. Mr. Primus, as always, it's a privilege and honor listening from you. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. My boss, for giving me this opportunity to say something this morning as we commemorate the International Youth Day celebrations. Our chief adjudicators for both the debate, speech, and poetry, the convener of the second Jumuiya Debate Competition, the directors, the head of partnership, the heads of communication, or you young people here present in your respective capacities. I take the honor to really thank you from the deepest, better bottom part of my heart for having organized a successful, a mind-blowing, and interesting debate competition, the second of its kind, named Jumuiya Debate. I am privileged that I've been part of the journey from the first Jumuiya to the second, and I must say we are only getting better and heading for best. Also, allow me to recognize the efforts of my colleagues from Global Platform Zimbabwe, Global Platforms Tanzania, Global Platform Kenya, who welcomed the idea once we shared with them about this tournament. I know Global Platform Kenya has worked with us from day one. Last year when we had the first Jumuiya debate, and this year we were joined by Global Platform Tanzania and Zim. And perhaps we should be thinking of how we can make this an African tournament, since the dream and the desire is for it to be the biggest Pan-African tournament that focuses on solving and discussing critical issues affecting Africans. How good it is and how sweet it is to see young people from across Africa, specifically East and Central Africa, debating. I was particularly amazed when I was looking at the teams, when I saw young people from Uganda, from Zimbabwe partnering as a team. That was for me one of the best learnings that I picked from this tournament, because we aspire to be one Africa, we aspire to be one East Africa, and such platforms should be a moment when we come together, when we can collaborate, when we can show solidarity. The other thing I critically learned is that it is possible for us to have a very strong movement of young Africans that are championing their own destiny. Reflecting on this year's theme that you've been discussing about young people at crossroads, realizing the right adequate food and decent living, I strongly believe that it is our responsibility as young people to begin shaping the kind of the future that we want. Because when we talk about the right adequate food, it's not only availability, it is affordability, it is accessibility of nutritious food. But we are in a continent where we still have children who are malnourished. Yesterday we were concluding the breastfeeding week, the World Week of Breastfeeding. And when you look at the statistics of young people who are malnourished, then you wonder if we are going to have innovations. Scientists tell us that there is a great correlation between the food we eat and what we are capable of producing in terms of innovations, in terms of knowledge. So the right to adequate food is pertinent. No wonder in his For Freedom speech in 1954, Franklin Roosevelt, when he was speaking about the fundamental speeches, and that was 4 years before 1948, when there was the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and towards the end of the World War. So when Franklin Roosevelt was addressing the American Congress, he said there are 4 fundamental rights. And one of them was the freedom from want. And in the freedom from want, that's where we drive the 2 fundamental rights, the right to adequate food and the right to development and decent living. And I'm happy that we've been talking about decent living and the right to adequate food. So we need to go deeper and ask ourselves from this debate tournament that what practical steps are we going to take as young people? If we are 100 teams, that is average 200 young people, what are we going to take forward from this debate tournament? How are we going to ensure that we advocate for the right adequate food and task our policymakers across the countries, but also be part of solving this problem? The right adequate food is currently being threatened by climate change conditions because our farmers are planting, but they are not harvesting and getting the right yields. Our farmers are not getting the right amount of money that should enable them afford the alternative food. If I'm planting matoke, I should be able to sell matoke and buy milk. If I'm planting maize, I should be able to sell and buy some watermelon to ensure that I'm having a nutritious food. So we have a cardinal responsibility as young people to ensure that we advocate for a safe environment where we can grow food that is going to enable us have a sustainable, right, adequate food. And I want to challenge all of us here present that the future is for us. We still have so many years to live as young people. We still have so many years ahead of us. So that simply means that me and you should be passionate about changing the status quo. We should be passionate about ensuring that the status quo that we are in is greatly improved. So I want to believe that from this Jumuiya Debate Tournament, we'll get mind-blowing policy proposals that we can work together to ensure that we become a continent that is food secure, a continent where everybody accesses food, where we do not have plenty. And this has a lot to do with our governance system. For those of you who can access books by Amartya Sen, he speaks about dictatorship or leadership, governance, right, adequate food. And he says, a hungry society will give birth to dictators. So we need to reflect on that, that when the politics become politics of food, unlimited food, the chances of us giving birth to dictators are high. I therefore want to challenge all of us that from this debate competition that we are having this morning, we do not only stop on speeches. The challenges of unemployment, the challenges of underemployment, the challenges of starvation, the challenges of lack of adequate food, the challenges of climate change cannot be solved by mere speeches, but by action. So before I conclude, I want to, if the moderator allows me, I see my colleague from Tanzania, Tayona, has just joined. So just say one word and then I will conclude and you go to the next step. Tayona, are you in? Tayona?
Yes, thank you, Famous. I am in. Thank you for ambushing me like this. Am I audible?
Yes, you're audible, Tayona.
Okay, I think just one or two words for me is that in the Bible there's a verse that I like, Matthew 11 verse 16. It says, Jesus is seated there and is observing what is happening, and then he starts saying, to what shall I compare this generation to? They are like children sitting on the street singing. We sang a ditch for you, you did not dance, and the story goes on. But basically what you pick up from this is that he's basically saying that an uninvolved, an unengaged generation gets the leadership that they deserve. An uninvolved and unengaged generation gets the world that they deserve. So if we so choose as young people to decide to be unengaged and uninvolved in this climate crisis, we will eventually get a world that is unsustainable, a world that is unequal, and a rampant increase in poverty. If we notice what has been happening around the pandemic of COVID, we saw how nations became very nationalistic and very inward-looking. We saw how people became very individualistic, and we saw how the rich became richer and
Tayona, we seem to have lost you.
And how the poor. So that is what I'm encouraging is that let's get involved in the issue of climate crisis.
Ty?
Accountable and cross-nation agreements.
Thank you, Ty. So to all of us here, the young people, our commitment is that as global platforms, we commit to continue working with you, because as global platform, we are that space that inspires and connects young people from across board, irrespective of gender, color, culture, to work with you this journey, the journey of ensuring that we have a better climate change, a journey of fighting inequality, a journey of ensuring that right adequate food, a journey to ensuring that poverty is no longer part of us, a journey of ensuring that we have right leadership that is transformative in nature for both women and men. And it's our hope that through such a debate, through such engagements, we can be able to translate them into action and be able to become a better nation, a better continent, and a better world. And like Tyrone has just said, the ultimate responsibility lies with us. And it is us to ensure that we become the people that we have been waiting for and put on the armor of the day, put on the shades of the day, and fight for the Africa that we want. Because Africa is rising, Africa is becoming better, Africa is becoming the continent that we desire. I want to thank you. And for the finalists, I want to congratulate you upon reaching this stage. And we cannot wait to watch the mind-blowing debate competition, the finals happening this morning. Thank you. And from all of us at the global platform, we wish you the best and we hope to continue engaging with you at all levels. Thank you and congratulations.
Thank you very much, Primus. And like always, it has been a pleasure and an honor listening from you. He is the manager of the Global Platforms Uganda, and it is a privilege. And we are so much grateful to Global Platforms Uganda, Global Platforms Kenya, Global Platforms Zimbabwe, and Global Platforms Tanzania for joining us in this struggle. My take from Mr. Primus's speech was that we should not leave the debate issues within the debate room. We have not just a responsibility, but also a duty to carry on whatever we understand from the debate room and practice it in our society. If from the debate rooms we've learned that we need to go and demand for something, let's say demand for access of quality food, then let's take it up. Let's not leave this within our debate rooms, and that has always been our take at the debate, the Uganda University Debate President's Council, that we shall continue going to our society, ensure that there is policy change and effect it. All right, we do not have a lot of time, and in the next few seconds, I'll be requesting the Chief Adjudicator, Ms. Molly, to take over as we shall be going in for the finals of the debate round. And soon after, we shall still be logging in to continue with not just the conversation, but to continue with the conference that shall be happening and all the ceremony that shall be going on with the global platforms that have united to bring it to us. And that is where at 2:30, the winners of the debate shall be announced and rewarded. Over to you, Ms. Molly, and to everyone, it has been an honor and privilege. It has been a long but worthy it walk.
I think Daliso can proceed. Mala is not in the group, in the meeting.
Oh, I thought I saw Molly join. I thought she was still in. But yes, Daliso, please brief us on what we're having next, because now over to you from the organizing committee. Okay, he tells me that we're already past 15 minutes of preparation time. He says we already passed, I get it from the tournament director, he says we already passed 15 minutes of preparation time, and it implies that the debaters should be ready to go in for the final round. Mr. Daliso says he's unable to unmute himself. I hope Mr. Training, I hope the tournament director can work on that. He's unable to unmute himself. He'll be giving us instructions that shall be taking us into the final round, where we expect the best of exception from all the finalists. Mr.
All right,
Daliso, let's listen from.
I hope I'm audible.
Yes, please, you are.
All right, great. So this is how the debate is going to be run. I'll start with a brief check-in just to make sure all teams are present, and the rules are the same. Each speaker has 7 minutes to present their speech. Points of information may be typed in the chat box unless the speaker says they want you to unmute yourself. So speakers, before you start your speech, just tell us your name, your preferred pronouns, and how you will be accepting your points of information. If you check the chat box, after 1 minute, I'll type 1 minute. After 6 minutes, I'll type 6 minutes. After 7 minutes, I'll type 7 minutes. And then you have your 15 seconds left to round up. So I am the lead. So once again, congratulations to all the teams to making it to the finals. And if any of my panelists are around, they can really quickly just introduce themselves. And then team members, I'll also ask them to introduce themselves as well, just so that we can check audibility and ensure that their microphones are working and that they have no technical challenges. I'm not sure because participants aren't able to unmute themselves. Teams, if you're present, could you please just type up your team name in the chat box so that I know all teams are present? That would greatly help. So teams, if you're present, type your team name and position in the chat box so I know we don't need to look for anyone. I'm just waiting for the teams to attend to roll call, and then we can begin with the Prime Minister's speech.
Teams, please, if you want to speak, kindly we ask you to unmute. Thank you.
Thank you. I see confirmation from opening government. We await opening opposition, closing government, and closing opposition. Teams, if you can hear, please just type it down so that we know you're present. I'm waiting for teams Thanos, John Wick, and Saitama's One Punch. Thanos, thank you. So the opening half is present. We're now waiting for closing half, that being closed government and closing opposition. So we are waiting for Team John Wick and Team Saitama's One Punch. Closing government, thank you for that confirmation. That leaves us with closing opposition, and then we can invite the Prime Minister to begin the debate for us. Once we get confirmation from closing opposition, I will reread the motion and then invite the Prime Minister to begin the speech. So right now we're just waiting for closing opposition to confirm that they're in the room so we can begin the debate. Closing opposition, Saitama's One Punch, please communicate. Let me briefly try and reach out to them on WhatsApp just to make sure that they're listening in on the meeting. And it looks like I have confirmation from Settlement and Punch. Thank you. So, right before calling upon the Prime Minister to begin the debate, I will reread the motion once more. The motion comes with an info slide. The info slide reads, Anthropocentrism, in its original connotation in environmental ethics, is the belief that value is human-centered and that all other beings are means to human ends. Thus, anthropocentrism views can be and have often been used to justify unlimited violence against the non-human world. In light of this, there has been a rise in youth-led environmental activism groups Prime Minister, you may begin the debate.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, everyone. I wasn't able to unmute myself. I'd just like to confirm my audibility for you now. Can you hear me? Am I audible and is everything clear?
You are audible. Please proceed.
Thank you very much. I will be having POIs in the chat. And yeah, I'm very excited to start. In 3, 2, 1, go. So panel, this debate is a very important debate because it alludes to the survival of the species. And I think it's important to understand that before we go any further. This house believes that anthropocentrism is justified. The burden of this debate and the team that will win is the team that will show that the principle of anthropocentrism is justified in ensuring the survival of humanity principally, and also the survival of other animals and other beings as well in a world that is better. And essentially, what you'll get from OG today is a fully characterized world that looks at how and where we are and how we got here and what that means. We're going to get a case from our side that tries to prove, and that does prove, in fact, that it is justified to have the anthropocentrist principle towards life and development. You're going to hear some argumentation of why that's the case. We're going to give you some impacting to show you what are the impacts of an anthropocentric world, but also we're going to give you a comparative analysis as to why our world is better than one without it. Now, let's first understand what exactly we're looking in this current world. We live in a world of a variety of different species with different capabilities that are all fighting for survival. Every animal is out there to ensure the survival of not only their own kind, but their own individual self. This is really important to understand because it is a vital part of the existence of life on this planet, and it characterizes every single activity we do, from eating, education, building roads, and having sex, for example. All of that is based on the idea of survival of the fittest. There's a natural competition between animals due to the scarcity of resources in the planet. And something you should never hear from opposition is the idea that we as humanity are beyond this. We are not. We are part of the human cycle, and we are absolutely part of this competition and this situation. It's very important to understand that what we're here to talk about is anthropocentrism insofar as it works towards human ends. We might hear this case from opposition that certain kinds of anthropocentric actions have actually harmed the environment, but what you'll find is that in many cases, some of those actually harm human beings as well. We don't think that is going to be valid in this debate, because in that case, it wouldn't necessarily be anthropocentric based on the motion, which clearly states that it needs to get to some human ends, and we believe that those human ends need to be understood. The human ends that we have in mind is specifically human survival in the long term. We're thinking of a world that is sustainable and that actually creates a better and much more hospitable environment for humanity. I'm taking a POI from any opposition team right now. No POI, so I'll continue. We also need to understand who the beings are in this case and the humanity. So humanity has a unique intelligence that sets it apart from everybody else. But also importantly, we are the only species that has a sense of morality that can give us a kind of situation where we can even think of this. What we believe is that every single being has its own sense of anthropocentrism that's based on their own species. So lions, for example, think of the world in terms of lions basis, and every single thing that exists around it is simply made towards the survival of lions. Now, and this is the case for all animals. So when you've understood this entire characterization of how the world works, the fact that animals are competing with each other, and that we as human beings, despite our intelligence and despite our morality, are also competing in that world, we need to understand how do we now move towards survival for humanity and for animal species. Well, what would be best is creating a world in which we as humanity create a sustainable world through using other beings towards those ends of sustainable human life. We believe that this will be good for humanity, but will also be good for animals, because there is a symbiotic relationship between the different species. Now, we need to understand status quo as it stands now. Where it stands now is that there's a lot of actions that are being justified with anthropocentrism, but in fact don't actually lead to this sustainable benefit for humanity. For example, the farming of animals so that we can get food, in fact, is harming the environment in the long term. We don't think that this is a genuinely anthropocentric view that will actually help us in the long term. And what we provide as OG is an alternative to this that says that let's fix this situation, create an environment that is extremely, extremely sustainable for everybody, and specifically human beings, because we are the powerful and intelligent species that have the capabilities to actually take care of these animals in a way that they themselves will not. Because without that paradigm, you'll have a world in which some other being would do the same thing and cause even more chaos and damage, because they do not have the intelligence, they don't have the morality to actually consider doing that in a way that is sustainable. We human beings are falling into this trap, but why we believe that anthropocentrism sets us apart is because our sense of morality and our sense of unique intelligence gives us that capability of actually thinking long term. And that sense is why we think it would provide a better world for them. So what do you get from OG today? You get a more sustainable world, because what we're doing is that humanity, yes, we're thinking of all the other animals and all the other beings in terms of our own survival, but we're doing it in a long-term fashion that ensures that all the animals exist. It's a fact that in any case, due to the survival of the fittest, not every animal will be able to make it in the long run. Animals will go extinct, animals will survive. But in a world in which anthropocentrism in its real sense, meaning towards a long-term sustainable goal, what we will see is a world in which every single species has a fair chance of survival under the auspices of a species that actually understands its role and takes it seriously and considers it consciously. Other animals can't provide this. And when we think of a world in which that isn't happening, when we think of the morality of other beings, we are giving them the opportunity and we are giving them the chance to come in and actually affect that. Because when we give, for example, animal rights, what we're saying is that we're creating a world in which we treat them as equal with humans. That gives us a problem which allows them an opportunity to disrupt this order, disrupt this structure, and disrupt this hierarchy, which can then cause much more harm by giving them the capacity to cause all sorts of chaos, whether accidental or incidental. And this is the reason why we think that our side brings a more sustainable world. It gives better survival for everybody involved. And in general, it is much, much better in terms of creating sustainability. Let's be clear about one last thing. Morality is based on the principle of self-awareness. Nearly all animals do not have that sense of self-awareness, and that is the reason why they do not have the morality that human beings have. But what we say is, because of that, giving other animals that opportunity will create the chaos that is required that will actually harm the survival of every single species. And with that argument, we are absolutely proud to propose.
All right, we thank the Prime Minister for giving us that opening speech to the debate. As we move on to Leader of Opposition, I think if we're having a few challenges with points of information, speakers, before you speak, just state how you would like your points of information asked. If you would like them to be typed in the chat box, if you're paying attention to the chat box, then you can state that you will take one POI from opening and one from closing, for example. If you would like them to be asked, then when a speaker wants to ask a point of information, I ask that they use the raise hand function, then your hand will show on the screen, so that when the speaker says, I will take you now, then we can unmute that speaker with their hand raised. So speakers also just let us know from whom exactly you're accepting the point of information, just to make the smooth running of debate here on Zoom easier. So introduce yourself, how you would like POIs. If you like them to be typed, you still have to accept that you want a POI from a specific person. If you prefer their mics to be unmuted, speakers raise your hand. And when a speaker takes your POI, they will say, I'm now accepting a point of information from this speaker, and we will unmute that speaker. So I now call upon the Leader of Opposition to introduce us to the clash for today's debate. Here.
Leader of Opposition, please type your name. We are working on making you co-hosts. Kindly be patient.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes, please proceed. The next speaker also send you in your name.
All right, I'll be starting in a bit, just settling, and then I'll begin. Okay. All right. So my name is Angelo, or BLO. I'll take POIs in the text space, really. So if you have a POI, just text POI in the text space. I'll check in my about 50 minutes, and then I'll engage you. Yes, okay. All right. So starting now. 3, 2, 1. Panel.
We think a Darwinist position to the ecosystem where human activity is actually indiscriminately justified because of the context of human conscience and strength, which often actually plays out as arrogance, in reality is actually problematic, right? So we basically get this whole idea from opening government that every organism is trying to survive, right? And that human beings are actually not beyond this particular system. Why is this actually false, right? We think that, first of all, human nature by itself makes human beings a conscious actor. But secondly, because of its heightened intelligence, humanity is actually able to circumnavigate the checks and balances that actually operate within the ecosystem. The natural checks on this, on the ecosystem, right? This makes them a special kind of creature within the whole human existence. And it's not true that they actually play out to the same laws that all other organisms actually do, right? We think that that is the basis of anthropocentrism, and it's exactly what the opening government was supposed to justify, as opposed to giving us some like charade, right? But we are willing to concede that sustainable exploitation of natural resources to actually facilitate human life is entirely justified, right? We think that it is entirely allowed for human beings to sustainably exploit their environment or their natural resources to facilitate their lives, right? We think that that is okay. But we do not think that that is actually the reality of anthropocentrism. We think that the reality of anthropocentrism makes it actually problematic because of two reasons. That first of all, it directly operates counter to the need for more conscious and ecocentric narrative that is actually required for now more than ever, right? We think that this is important because in the world of today, it is important for human beings not just to look within, but to look outside and recognize the harms that have caused to the environment, and therefore start to actually adopt mechanisms and behaviors towards fixing those particular harms, right? But secondly, we think that it is often justification for denialists and impact. And the impact of this is actually creating a bubble that actually drives positions like climate change is natural because it is directly as a result of human behavior, right? We think that that is an important aspect in this particular debate. But thirdly, we think that unsustainable exploitation of natural resources is more likely in a world where you actually justify anthropocentrism, right? With no checks or balances whatsoever. Lastly, from opening opposition, we'll show you the impact of this and why it is actually inherently inhuman and undermines the very essence of what life is. So first of all, recognize, panel, the trajectory of climate change, of population, of food insecurity, of extinction of species on the planet for the last 50 years makes it unjustifiable for human beings to actually proceed under the notion that they're the alpha and omega, right? It makes it unjustifiable for human beings to actually proceed under the guise that they have power over everything, right? We think that alternatively, ecocentrism allows for recognition of the harms of human activity, first of all, and secondly, it allows for a conscious human effort to actually adopt these particular policies and mechanisms that change that particular trajectory. We think that that is almost impossible under OG's world, because under OG's world, you operate under the recognition that human beings have power over everything, right? Therefore, they cannot do wrong. That makes it more difficult for people to make conscious decisions to actually recognize the harms that they've done and take positions to actually mitigate those particular harms, right? We think that that is what is worst for human beings and for human life on a whole, right? And we think that we regret that position. But secondly, we think that justification for anthropocentrism is often used as justification for climate change deniers because they operate under the mechanism that curtails the very questioning of human behavior in relation to the use of their particular environment, right? We think that this reinforces narratives like, for example, climate change is natural and is more likely to leave humanity on the same trajectory that is already problematic for it now, right? But we think in extension to this position also, a retrospective analysis actually reveals that given the position of humanity now, it it is unjustifiable, i.e. the unsustainable use of its natural resources, it's actually unjustifiable for us to even further deny anthropocentrism, because it is the whole reason that we are here in the first place. Human beings literally killing the planet because they think, because of their unique position in life, they're actually allowed to do whatever they want to the planet, and everything that happens as a result of that is actually natural and entirely justified because, well, we are human, right? We are beyond question. We think that is problematic. But fourthly, from opening opposition, we tell you that first of all, on the trajectory of today, there is one, limited resources, but secondly, there are better ways to actually exploit these particular resources, right? We think that it is important for us to recognize, first of all, that given the world today, it is important for us to distribute these resources in the most effective way and to use these resources in a way that allows for the best sustainability, which is a word we get
Hi, yes, we've lost him. I've paused his time on 5 minutes, 32 seconds. That was the exact moment I heard his voice disappear. I was concerned if it was just a network error, but you were going deeper. You had just finished the idea that retrospectively we ended up here because of our attitudes towards the anthropocentrism, and after the point on how we're allowing climate change deniers to utilize this to their advantage. So you were constructing the points after that. I will let you begin from there, then wait about 10 seconds before I press continue on the timer, just so that you can get back into your element.
all right. So I was at the retrospective analysis, yeah?
You had just finished that.
Oh, okay. Like totally finished?
I wouldn't know, but I'll let you start from there, just when you were finishing. And then when you get to where I was, I'll press resume on the timer that I have.
All right, thank you. Okay. So on a retrospective analysis, we think that the whole justification for why we are in this dire position in the first place, i.e. struggling with climate change, extinction, and all these particular problems, global warming, right, is because human beings have often treated resources, animals, plants, the whole ecosystem like it's some sort of playground, right, without actually respecting the ecosystem and actually advocating for a protection of that ecosystem in order to sustain life, right? We think that that type of arrogance is exactly why we're in this position. And we think that that arrogance is directly as a result of anthropocentrism. And we think that it is entirely unjustifiable for us to actually reinforce that particular mechanism. But fourthly, from opening opposition, we tell you that, first of all, there's a recognition of limited resources on the planet. That makes it necessary for human beings to find, one, sustainable ways to actually exploit their natural resources, but two, to exploit those resources in a way that allows for the sustainability, not just of humanity itself, but the sustainability of life on the planet, right? We think that killing the earth amounts to human beings actually knifing themselves in the foot, right? Which is exactly what would be the natural result of the opening government's case. So a comparative, right? We think that it is impossible for opening government's world to actually advocate for a protection of life. Why is this true? We think that, one, it advocates for a protection of human life. Why is a protection of human life not necessarily the same as a protection of life? A retrospect of the last 100 years, right? We think that the highest temperatures on the planet, global, we think that global, the highest levels of pollution ever, we think that the largest numbers of extinct species ever makes it very clear that human beings are literally killing while they're trying to protect themselves. This is not what We think that where you actually regret or you downplay anthropocentrism for alternatives like ecosystem, it more necessary for us to actually protect life as opposed to protecting human life. We think that protecting life has the direct effect of protecting life has the direct effect of protecting, right? We think that where the earth dies, it is inevitable for human beings to follow in the natural, and therefore we think that why we win on impact and on a comparative. Our world gives you more utility. I rest.
All right, we thank the Leader of Opposition for that speech and introducing us to the Clash and Opposition bench. I now call upon the Deputy Prime Minister to come and further the case for opening government. Hear, hear.
Hey guys, am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Just give me a short countdown from 5 to per se 0 so that I sync the timer with the beginning of your speech. Thanks.
Okay, so I'm gonna start my speech in 5, 4, 3, 2. Wait. So sorry. I just wanna also have my timer as well. Right. So I'm gonna start my speech in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. So panel, we believe opening opposition already falls out of this today's debate, right? First of all, we need to understand that this is a motion that is based on principle and not impact. This means that it's not only good enough. This means that it's not only good enough for opening opposition to come and show us the detriments of, or how the disadvantages of the impact of anthropocentrism, right? But then also, how does ecocentrism, something that they're actually advocating for, actually come or show the means or the means to the end that they're trying to show? They don't show us in any one of the speech, and this is why, first of all, they lose out in today's debate. But as already talked about by my PM, we believe that everything that they're talking about ecocentric action works within our contextualization of anthropocentrism. You can realize that every time when he talks about the advantage or the advantage of the humans, we believe that the effect or the whole impact of anthropocentrism is at the end of the day, as my PM said, for human survival in the long term. We think that this is the reason why we solely justify this, and we're actually going to show you how you can't get this in any other world that they're trying to show that they're having or are going to show it to you. But then also we believe that they haven't engaged our model in how this actually impacts the long term, right? But then also we believe that survival of animals is very important, and this can actually be gotten on the interest of anthropocentrism. Why do we think this? Because we think that the whole world of anthropocentrism cannot exist, or the sustainability of humans or the means to the end of humans is inexistent or impossible without animals, right? So we think that in as much as these people are taking the moral objective, and that because humans need to survive in the long term, we think that humans also are going to do whatever they can to make sure that these animals are going to ensure that they're focusing, or they're going to actually play out or actually be involved in the long term. And this is why they are actually losing out also into this period. But thirdly, we aren't justifying status quo, right? We aren't justifying status quo, but what we are currently saying as opening government is we can save the world in an anthropocentric view. We think that when we provide this anthropocentric view in the long term, then this will eventually lead to the betterment of our society. So what I'm going to come to necessarily do for you is to bring a comparative as to the world in which we have the ecocentrism, which is what they're trying to advocate for, but then also come to show you how in our world we win necessarily. First of all, we think that this motion doesn't only work in urban centers or in urban areas whereby there's a distinct difference, or areas in which animals live and humans live, but they can also take this motion to the rural areas where there's an actual clash or impact or actual distribution or relation between animals and human beings. We think that in this instance, we need to consider a scenario as to who is more superior than the other. Dion has already came and given you a substantive argumentation as to why humans are unique and need to understand their role in the society. We think that these are the people that deserve to have the morality to create actions that are beneficial or for themselves and for the others at the end of the day. And this is why we think humans should be in charge of that. We're talking about a situation whereby there's actually been a fight between animals and people. There's been various conflicts between animals and people that exist in the society. We can talk about this whereby in India, you have people who believe that because animals are equivalent to human beings, then they should be allowed to roam around in the streets and do whatever they want. We think that this has actually led to elephants marching on farmlands of human beings and actually destroying the produce, destroying everything that they're going through, and actually not making a situation not sustainable, right? We look at in America, whereby animals are actually on the loose and at the end of the day end up attacking people in their own homes. And because of that, we think that at the end of the day, this does not look into the general good or the means to the end of the people. And this is why we're actually supporting this motion. But looking at the scenario whereby we're going to making sure that these people or these animals and these people are equivalent. We think that this conflict will actually be detrimental not only to the people, but also to the animals, right? Because we think that when these animals come into these spaces where they're not allowed, they're going to be killed, they're going to be attacked. We think that in an instance where human beings have the ability to actually protect these people because they're superior, we think that people create these game reserves or these places where these animals can actually roam freely and actually these animals are actually, surviving in their own areas. And we can only do this whereby we have a scenario whereby anthropocentrism is prioritized in our world, right? At the end of the day, panel, we're saying that these humans are going to retaliate against these animals, something in which ecocentrism is actually bringing to today's debate. And this is actually why their scenario fails in today's world, right? Get us right, panel. We think we agree with opening opposition saying that, yes, we are living in a world of limited resources, right? Not only limited resources such as food and water, right? But then also limited land. If you're going to put us into a scenario whereby you actually have to choose between humans and animals in the play out, what do we choose for the general sustainability of the people, right? Which is our case today. We're repeating that we think that the only way that we can get human or animal sustainability in the long term is when you prioritize anthropocentrism. Why? Because we say that humans have unique intelligence. We think that you cannot compare the morality of a human being to the morality of animals. Before the time goes out, I'll take
Please engage the argument that the only reason we have animals roaming the streets in the United States is precisely because ecosystems have been destroyed and therefore animals are coming into direct contact with human beings.
Panel, as already I have characterized in today's motion, we don't think that this is a scenario whereby animals actually come and take this, right? We think that in an instance where proper boundaries are not created between where animals should exist and where people should exist, creates the scenario whereby animals can actually coexist, right? And we think in this particular scenario is the only reason or the only way in which this scenario comes into play. But we think that in an instance where humans are actually going to use, for example, economic activities in an area, we think relocation of animals is actually something that actually exists in today's debate, right? We don't think we're just going to deforest an area just because animals are there and we're not going to kill them, right? We think we tell them and reach them and take them into a certain other area. And this is due to the issue of anthropocentrism. We're actually advocating for the needs of human beings, but at the end of the day, also looking at the importance of animals, because we understand that at the end of the day, the only way that we can achieve the sustainability of human beings is not only humans alone, but humans in collaboration with animals, and you can only get that from side opening government. And this is why I'm definitely proud to win from opening government. Thank you.
And now we agree.
All right, thank you for that speech. I will now call upon the Deputy Leader of Opposition to come and close the first half of this debate for us. Here, Deputy Leader, do introduce yourself, and give me a brief countdown so that I can sync the timer. Thanks.
Hello, can you guys hear me? I hope I'm loud and clear. Someone can just confirm that I can be heard.
Yes, we can hear you, Stephen.
Okay, wonderful. Just type out the POIs in the text space, and I will immediately take them from anything. Right. So just a second. So I will start my speech in 3, in 2, and in 1. Mr. Chair, in the wake of forest fires in countries like Algeria that yesterday killed about 57 people, in the wake of floods in China, in the wake of hurricanes in the United States of America, and in the wake of historical context that has primarily been predicated on how much we can benefit humanity, it is absurd that Team Open Government come up and tell us that this narrative can now achieve sustainability. We think that this has been particularly false. And we think that the primary reason Team Open Government will rank 4th in this debate is because they have chosen to take a moderate stance and attempt to sit on the fence, kind of, right? Because they have failed to clearly show to us what type of world precisely they are defending. They seem to have a conflict between themselves of whether they actually want to push forward human interests, or whether they want to pursue a more ecocentric view and a more ecocentric narrative, right? So I asked the Deputy Prime Minister, right? Why are animals existing with human beings today? And why are we having the clashes that exist today? What they tell us is that we can then eventually relocate the animals and that type of thing. We think that anthropocentrism in itself does not deal with the relocation of animal species. It deals with the exploitation of them for a human end. So we don't exactly see how that argument fits into the general relevant case that we would expect from an open government team. We hope that closing government will do better. But generally, we think that the primary reason we're having a conflict between animals and human beings is precisely because ecosystems have been destroyed, right? Because forests have been destroyed, because swamps have been encroached upon, because swamps have been drained. This is precisely why animals are coming into contact with human beings, because people have persistently pushed into the reserves of what would ordinarily be animals. Open government want us to believe that, you see, we shall relocate them to another place. But what happens in the anthropocentric worldview is that even those other places are bound to be exploited because their worldview is predicated on the idea that human superiority is what is paramount. So even if that relocation existed, which is first of all not relevant to their case, but even if they did do it, we think that the anthropocentric worldview essentially permits for the exploitation of those reserves, and eventually the problem persists. Why do we think that what we suggest is better? We think that what we suggest is better because essentially the boundaries that Team OG agree should exist between animals and people only exist in a world where we do not infringe upon or encroach upon the resources that should be for animals, and we leave those resources to be. So we do not think, again, that OG has been particularly relevant in this debate. And let us then deal with the broader argument of this supposed sustainability that is pushed forward under the open government case. Because OG wants us to believe that somehow they are going to push forward sustainability and that they are going to look into the long term. We think that the very nature of consumption, which is the concept upon which anthropocentrism is predicated, is built on a short-term view to things. The reason that we have the destruction of swamps, the reason that we have the cutting down of forests, the reason that we have the destruction of natural resources is precisely because our view of them is in the short term. We view human consumption as something in the immediate sense without any consideration whatsoever of what happens in the future. That is why today we have the problems that we have, because for the past centuries, what has been pursued is an anthropocentric worldview. So we think again that that argument does not stand. Sustainability is only achieved in our world where we pursue a more ecocentric perspective, where we are considerate of and cognizant of the reality that the environment must exist and that the necessity to pursue human consumption ends must be done in consideration of that. But what is the constructive that you get from my speech, right? I will not take OG. OG has been particularly relevant in this debate. What is the constructive that you get in my speech? What we tell you is that there is a historical context to how anthropocentrism has been pursued, right? Because the only argument that closing government can run is that somehow we have a certain benefit for humanity in their world. But we'll tell you that this is not entirely true. In reality, what happens when an anthropocentric worldview is pursued is that what happens is that the people that control resources and people that control power are essentially the primary beneficiaries of this, right? So we look at things such as capitalism, which is essentially an amassing of wealth amongst people that control resources. We look at things such as colonialism, which in and of itself buys into an anthropocentric worldview, which is essentially short-sighted consumption, irrespective of what the considerations may be. From whom you talk money, you talk profit, you talk benefit for certain people. But we tell you that these benefits scarcely accrue to everyone. In the typical cases, they typically accrue to people that are able to exploit these resources for their own ends, right? And we think that that is entirely unjustifiable. The reason that we have the perpetuation of inequality and unequal structures in our society today is precisely because how consumption has been done, and the people that are able to carry out this consumption are typically people in the higher classes of society. Essentially, anthropocentrism at its core is an exclusionary structure because it cannot be inclusive of everyone. Why do we think that what we suggest is better? Because what we tell you is that when we pursue a more environmentally considerate approach, we essentially have something that benefits everyone. Why? Because the rich people do not destroy the forests that the poor people rely on for their daily livelihood. The rich people do not destroy the wetlands that the poor people use to get water, that they use for cooking, and that they use for cleaning. And that is essentially what you have in our world. You have a more inclusive world because we are considerate of and cognizant of the reality that everyone benefits from in one way or another from the existence of this. The pursuit of human consumption, which is intrinsic to the anthropocentric idea, essentially never can or can never benefit anyone because we think historically it has already demonstrated an incapacity to do so. The fact that we have the fact that colonialism, for example, was predicated on the exploitation of resources in the African world to benefit colonial masters. The fact that capitalism essentially is a pursuit of profit and self-interest at the expense, first and foremost, of people, but secondly, of the environment, with total disregard for how it happens. And we see these cases such as in the United States during the Industrial Revolution, or in China today, which is one of the largest carbon emitters. We think that that is something that is intrinsic to the anthropocentric worldview. Why is what we suggest therefore better? Because in our world, you have a more considerate approach in the consumption of resources. We think that the idea, therefore, that is peddled under the anthropocentric worldview, and we hope that closing government can actually engage this, is an idea that is intrinsically short-sighted. We tell you that sustainability is primarily achieved under our world and not under the world where we pursue an anthropocentric worldview. And we think that that is something that's intrinsically important. So because we give you the historical context and why there's actually no greater utility for all humanity and essentially utility for certain people, we are very proud to oppose. Thank you.
All right, we thank that lovely speaker for giving us the speech and for closing the first half of this debate. I now call upon the member of government to come and extend the debate on government bench and introduce us to the second half of this debate. Hear, hear.
I would like to know if I am really audible. It's really important.
You are, please proceed.
So I'm Lowell, pronouns he, him. If you have a question, please feel free to type it in the text space. A few seconds. Okay, I'll start. I'm trying to time myself. Okay, before I start, I would like to thank everyone for this tournament. It has really been a great one. I want to thank all the debaters who have engaged us and all those who have been able to follow up until this stage. Having said that, I'll start in 3, 2, and then 1. So panel, every other year we have about 20 species going into extinction. We have human beings always at the threat of their demise with a lot of pandemic diseases, which we are not sure that next time we are able perhaps to get a cure or be able to live. We think the threat of extinction is as obvious as it has always been in every day. We don't think that what happened to dinosaurs cannot still happen to human beings. We think human beings have a duty to prioritize themselves over every other thing but themselves. We don't agree with the opening when they come with a very ambiguous case on how they think they have a moral responsibility to go ahead and sustain other species or some sort of have a go-between. We think we are proud to take a radical position to be able to defend humanity. We think that intrinsically human beings have a lot of value, and that value must some sort of be upheld through utilization of every other thing, not as an end, but as a means. We don't think animals in and of themselves should be seen as ends in and of themselves, but rather as means to humanity's survival. We are proud to say that from closing government. That context is very important. I'm going to do basically 4 things. 1, the idea of self-preservation. 2, the idea of incentive and reward. 2, the comparative advantage. At panel, we think largely this debate must be judged on principle, on why human beings should go ahead and prioritize themselves over the others. We don't think this debate can be won on the pragmatics. Panel. First, on the idea of self-preservation, we understand that we had some sort of a mint analogy from our opening, but we think it is important for us to debate this debate quite extensively, and why self-preservation is important. 1, the idea of urges. We tell you that human beings don't, for example, have the luxury that you had from opening, that we have all these 1,000 years to be able to sustain everyone else. We tell you human beings are at the threat every other day. We don't think that, for example, if COVID was some sort of more thorough than it is, we would still be living. We tell you that therefore it is important for human beings to always continue to look at other ways, at other human beings as a means, as a mechanisms on how they can be able to preserve themselves. We don't think we have like the moral justification or even the justification whatsoever to prioritize the existence of other beings at the expense of our own beings. We think, for example, if we discovered a particular species which is likely to cause another disease like COVID, would be able to extinct that particular other species because it is harmful to human beings. We think that is why, for example, health personnel some sort of have stopped individuals in our society from relating or accessing all these other animals that are dangerous and are easy and likely to cause diseases like chimpanzees, etc. That kind of context is very important. Secondly, we tell you human beings are justified in prioritizing themselves. 1, because of the efforts. We think human beings in and of themselves are the only species which goes ahead some sort of work, right? They have like these efforts, they work for their own survival, they work every day to get food, to do all these things. we think that we can therefore not say that these individuals are not justified in prioritizing themselves. We don't think, for example, when a person goes to work from morning to evening and gets a salary, those individuals are some sort of not justified if they don't get these things and give them to the poor, or some sort of don't throw this money on the streets because it's needed more. We think people are justified in being able to prioritize their own interest in the event where they have worked for them. We think that principle is very important. But finally, before I continue with my case, I would like to draw a comparative. One, panel, why are human beings not justified in prioritizing all these other things as an end, not as a means, at their own expense? One, because one, human beings do not understand what is in the interest of this particular species. All these things operate on the assumption that we actually do. Things like the need to protect the environment, things like to protect animals, panel, you have to understand that all those things are seen through the anthropocentrism perspective, which inherently seeks to say human beings have an intrinsic value and must be protected. Panel, notice why we protect animals in our contemporary society. One is for things is for things like tourism. Secondly, like for our generations after us to come and see them. Those are things that entirely seek to benefit human beings, not necessarily to protect these particular animals. Let's engage on the idea of climate change. What is the characteristic of climate change and those who perpetrate or who perpetrate it, right? One, we tell you that largely climate change deniers are individuals from opening side. Why? Because they entrench the narrative that actually human beings overestimate themselves and think they have control over the environment, that some sort of, they think that they have a lot of value against all these other things. One, what does that do? It says that human beings should some sort of shrink to their own spaces, continue to do what they do because they don't have control all over things. People who are pro-climate change, us, we tell you that no, that actually human beings have a lot like they can do using these other environments. One, for example, for their own benefit for them to live, because we think that planet is at the blink of suffering at the hands or at the threat of climate change. And that is why we go ahead some sort plant trees, for example, which absorb carbon dioxide. That is why we go on to make all these mitigations. Why? Because we think this environment in and of itself must work in the best interest for us. The reason why we control the environment and all these things in the long run is because we want to benefit our own existence, right? We think at the point where, for example, human beings realize that conserving the environment is harmful to their own life, they would not conserve it. The reason why climate change pioneers are celebrated and why we have this debate is because we realize that it is important for us to control everything around us as a means for us to be able to survive, because if we don't, we are at the threat of climate change. We think that kind of analysis and analogy is important, especially taking the vast part of the case from our opening opposition, which some sort of centers its whole debate on a wrong context, on the wrong assumption. They fail to understand that climate change deniers are actually from their side because they think human beings don't have control over these things. Human beings some sort of should not go ahead and control everything else for their own life. We think that in and of itself is very important. But secondly, why we think we are not justified in some sort of preserving everything else? Because one, we don't have a duty to. Why? Because we don't think that, for example, our own survival is going to be corrected by morality. One, because they have not done the same thing. One, to give you an example of animals, we think at any point if a lion came into contact, for example, with a human being, they would eat them up, right? Because we don't have a duty to protect those particular other species in as far as they don't benefit us, right? We think the only reason
I don't know if it's just me. I think we seem to have lost the speaker in his last 10 or so seconds. Speaker, if you can hear me, you have like 10 seconds to round up your speech, but given that we were at 7 minutes, if he cannot come back instantly, then I think we can safely move on.
I can.
Oh, all right. You can just round up for 15 seconds. You had 15 seconds left. We lost you for a bit.
Okay, so Pando conclusively we tell you that what was argued in opening opposition is a narrative of anthropocentrism who seek to benefit themselves. The conservation of the environment and all these other things is done in the interest of human beings at the point where those things threaten the supremacy of human beings or their own survival, the intrinsic value. Those things are also going to be abandoned. We tell you this is the best thing to do because all these species don't have our back. At the point where you come in contact with a lion, it is going to eat you, it's not going to spare you. We are justified in protecting ourselves. We are justified in all these things because the human survival as a principle in and of itself is justified in all ways.
Time's up. We thank the member of government for that speech. I now call upon the member of opposition to come and continue the closing half of this debate by extending the case on opposition bench. Hear, hear.
Okay, all right. And yeah.
Ready when you are, just introduce yourself and give us a 5-second countdown so that we are aware you are beginning your speech. Thanks.
All right, for a second there, I couldn't unmute, but I think it's 7 minutes, 15 seconds. Okay, my timer is set. And yeah, before I start, I just want to send a shout out to Denise. Yeah, round 1 to finals. It's been hectic. I don't know, whatever comes out of this, it's been beautiful. It's been great. Yeah, I've always loved you as my partner, but yeah, I still hate you. So I'm going to start in 3, 2, 1, go. POIs in the text. Panel, understand why the debate is going to begin from closing opposition. We think largely from opening half, there's a lot of miscontextualization and these guys don't do justice. Why? We think from opening half, they merely argue and exchange opinions. That is to say, which is this thing right or not? We think this debate is not more or less about how anthropocentrism is either right or not right. We think we must provide justification. And what entails justification? We think justification entails a team providing us morally why this becomes right. But let me engage them and show you why these people don't fall out. We think one, largely when you look at anthropocentrism, we think anthropocentrism, to make it simple, and even from info slide, basically human beings prioritize themselves at the expense of non-human life. That is to say, non-human life like animals, the environment, and all that stuff. We think that is what anthropocentrism looks like. But secondly, it looks like one, humans exerting their dominance on animals, for example, hurting them, and basically they use torture, it's full out, it's man, surviving and all those things. We think that is how anthropocentrism looks like, not what opening government tried to tell us, but engaging them. Why do opening government make a concession that there are limited resources? You get? Opening government say that all species are looking for competition. Now, let me show you why the limited resources then don't justify anthropocentrism. We think at a point in time where there exists a hierarchy where man is at the top of the chain and animals are down and non-human life, it becomes unjustifiable. Why? Opening government accept the circle of life exists. We tell you, at a point in time where there are limited resources, we tell you non-human lives are part of the resources. At a point in time where you sideline them and use them up and become detrimental to them, we think at a point the ripple effect is that human beings in of themselves are going to not live right. Why? At the end of the day, they are going to harm and devour all the limited resources, which opening government constitutes. So what does that show you? That shows you that one, the limited resources include the non-human life. At a point in time, anthropocentrism provides an scapegoat where these people can continue harming and even harming the environment. We tell you at that point in time, the long run is that we endanger the human existence itself. We tell you on that case, opening government is out. But secondly, opening government talk about how anthropocentrism in most cases can even harm human beings. We tell you at a point in time where it even harms the person at the order, because one, they devour all the resources and all that. It shows you that one, it can't be good. Why? At the end of the day, anthropocentrism is going to affect mankind itself, which affects the goal of existence within humankind. So we tell you at that point in time, it doesn't become like right. So we tell you, opening government largely lose out. Why? Because they fail to show us why like that justification like provides. But secondly, they are unable to show why, because anthropocentrism is basically an scapegoat for people like to keep committing these harms to the environment and non-human beings. I'm able to show you that committing these harms to non-human beings becomes detrimental. Why? In the long run, they are the limited resources. When you devour them, it becomes hard for you to become sustainable. But still, closing government. Closing government come and talk about like human life, how is a means to an end. Pano, understand, we tell you, non-human lives have value. Why? The value they possess is that they present a reliable resource to the existence of mankind. At a point in time where we say anthropocentrism, which is an scapegoat to like justify all that violence, it becomes difficult. Why? The value in non-human life is that they present a significant impact in the existence of mankind. That is to say, the tons of animals in the wildlife that help like sustain the environment. That is to say, like they reproduce. At the end of the day, their corpses die within. So we tell you, animals possess a significant value in sustaining human life. That is to say, they contribute to replenishing of the environment. But thirdly, the environment itself contributes to like existence of human life. Why? The environment and the animals are what like take care of the soils and all those things. We tell you in such a scenario, it becomes important. And this is the nuance that is missing from opening opposition. Why? Opening opposition are unable to show you the clear link as to what the value of non-human life presents, but secondly, they are unable to show you the interconnectedness, which is the nuance we present, and it's important. Why is it important? That nuance then shows you that at the end of the day, the fact it proves that one, non-human life has value to offer in the sustainability and existence of human life. But secondly, it proves to you that the whole system is interconnected. Opening government talk about how it's not justified, why we don't understand. Pano, this is like unrealistic. Why? We think all human beings, like even animals, seek to thrive. Like they protect their loved ones, they protect their children. We tell you in such scenarios, it's not an assumption. We understand animals want to protect themselves. So at a point in time where closing government tell you that we don't understand such things, we tell you that that is unrealistic. But secondly, we tell you at a point in time where we buy into anthropocentrism, one, it's not justified, one, because of the moral aspect. We think anthropocentrism then like removes all obligation to man, like they don't have any moral obligation. Why does moral obligation important in this debate? Moral obligation is important in this debate. Why? The fact that I'm able to show you that non-human life at a point in time where we like make it extinct, it poses a threat to human life. Why? Human life then becomes endangered. We lose all the benefits to sustain ourselves. Why? We tell you, the circle of life works that one, we must keep things in a balance. When we are on a seesaw and like you were above the seesaw falls on one heavier side. We tell you, human beings in of themselves are intrinsically selfish. Anthropocentrism provides them an scapegoat where they continue like harming the environment and it becomes bad. Why? The lack of moral obligation, makes them and give them inability to take care of the environment and non-human like lives. Why? I'm able to prove to you that non-human lives present a significant impact to the existence of humankind. That impact and that link shows you clearly why we must not advocate for anthropocentrism. Why? It increases the greed of human beings, which then makes them devour these non-limited resources, which the human-like lives and what all consist of. We tell you in that case from closing opposition, we don't stand for that. Why? Non-human life has the ability to sustain.
All right, we thank the member of opposition for giving us that exciting speech, and I'll call upon the government whip to come and close the case on government bench. Hear, hear.
Am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Just introduce yourself and give us a countdown as you begin for timing purposes. Thanks.
I am Fortunate Okello. I will be the Fortunate Okello. I will be the government whip. Let me just try to get something. I would prefer to time myself from here. It's much easier for me.
All right, ready when you are.
All right. All right. I'll begin my countdown in about 5 seconds. All right, Pano, the real reason why closing government ranks first is because firstly, we speak in a world where we essentially put humans first and we get a direct impact of preserving human life above all else, regardless of the means adopted, right? Kindly disregard everything you get from our opening because they take on a more conservative line of thought, a safe line, or they play the safe card, right? What now will tell you this extension that we are proud to take on a more extensive and a more radical line of thought from closing government for as long as one, it ensures the continued existence of human life. What do we tell you? First, we give the idea of self-preservation and why it's an artisan we need to adopt right now. That, firstly, given an alternative between animals and human beings, if animals were given the opportunity to survive at the expense of killing humans, they would gladly do it. What does this necessitate? That human beings take on the same radical stance that one, preserve themselves from extinction, right? But then secondly, we tell you that we are justified in prioritizing humans above other species because one, we do not know what the other species want, right? And to the point that we choose to prioritize them, we only prioritize them to the point that we stand to gain some sort of utility from by prioritizing their continued existence. I will give examples of things like setting up zoos for animals like lions and things like that. Right? We stand to gain some sort of monetary returns from doing this. That is why we in essence choose to do it, right? But then secondly, we choose to preserve things like forests and lakes, right? We only do it in the long run. We acknowledge what the impact of climate change is on the environment. And should we not do this, we then stand to result. What's the necessity? That we preserve the environment in order to one, ensure that human beings continue to exist on a big global scale. Panel, the idea adopted by the opposition bench that because we are taking on this line of thought, we shall not in essence taking attention to what is happening around us is largely false, right? Especially within the characterization of what we have in the present world. It's highly likely that human beings achieve more when we choose to preserve lakes, when we choose to preserve forests and things like that, because one, we stand to gain more from it, right? We stand to like make our ends meet when we stand to preserve the environment, because ultimately we stand to like deflect the adverse effects of climate change. But then lastly, we tell you the reason we preserve the environment, is because we stand to protect human life now and in the future, right? We do not owe a duty to any of those animals, because if the cards are dropped and it's us and them, they will always choose themselves over us. Why then should we opt to choose animals over ourselves, right? That is the comparative which the opening opposition was supposed to give us, which the closing opposition was supposed to give us, which they urgently failed to do, right? The failure to justify why we choose why we should choose other animals over ourselves, yet when given the opportunity, they would gladly choose themselves over us. On a comparative analysis panel, we tell you that you stand to gain more from side closing government. One, because we ensure that we preserve human life, but then two, because we live in a world where the environment is crucial to the sustained living of humans, you then stand to gain more from us, because human beings are willing to do anything and everything to preserve themselves. They are more likely to preserve the environment, because preserving the environment ensures their own continued survival. Right? What do you get from closing opposition? Firstly, the idea of the interconnectedness of human life and why this necessitates that we preserve the environment. But now we tell you from side closing government that we are more than glad, to make sure that a select group of animals go extinct or distinct to the point that they do not serve to help us ends meet. Why is that the case, right? Because some of these things tend to be harmful to the continued existence of the human race. To the point where some of them are harmful, we are glad to kick them out of the eco circle, right? But those who stand to gain some utility from, those who stand to benefit us, we are more than likely to help them survive or to keep them in zoos and things like that. Because one, they help us achieve what the ultimate goal of today's debate is, which is human preservation at the expense of everything else. What else do you get from closing opposition? The idea of the moral obligation human beings have to this life because of the interconnectedness. But we do not owe them anything, because when the cards are dropped and the tables are shifted, they have no obligation to us, and they will let us go extinct in order to preserve
and help themselves survive. Panel, today's debate takes place between closing government and opening opposition. Disregard opening government, disregard everything you get from CO. What do we get from OO, right? Firstly, the idea of the short-sightedness of anthropocentrism in the historical context, right? It don't likely gives you an idea or characterization of how individuals in the past always cut down trees and killed animals in order to preserve themselves, and that likely led to one, climate change in the present, and that's why human beings are suffering right now. Panel, notice that in the world that we lived in the past, right? It was necessary for human beings to one, cut down trees, for human beings to construct factories and work hard in order to serve themselves and preserve their life at the expense of everything else, right? Notice that the alternative that we would get from opening opposition is a world where we choose not to cut down trees because, hey, we want to preserve the environment and then we die in the long run, right? But now we think from side closing government, you stand to gain more intelligence from us when one, you are willing to cut down these things or do whatever it takes, even destroying the environment for as long as one helps us survive, right? But panel, we tell you in the present characterization, in the context of the modern day world, it's highly unlikely that individuals are going to cut down trees or go around wantonly destroying the environment because they want to get something from it. We tell you that because human beings, our end or our continued survival on the planet is likely hinged survival of the planet as a large, like at large, is the reason why human beings are willing to preserve the environment right now. So we tell you stand to gain more from us, right? In the past, human beings were willing to cut down trees because one, it was the only means of survival, right? But in the present, where we have other means of survival, we are more than glad to preserve it only to the end or to the extent that it helps human beings meet their ultimate goal, which is the continued survival of the human race, right? Secondly, the idea of sustainability. Why don't we tell you that sustainability of the environment is nothing we stand to identify with from side closing government to the point that it doesn't help us achieve what our desired ultimate goal is. The ultimate goal in today's debate panel is preservation of human life. We think we do not stand to identify with anything that directly contradicts or clashes with the idea of preservation of human life at all expenses. We think we are proud to win from closing opposition. What do you get from the Prime Minister, right? Essentially that people who like climate change deniers essentially use anthropocentrism as of destroying the environment. Panel, we tell you from side closing government by extension and by analysis, right? That firstly, human beings are that human beings are not going to cut down trees if they know that the impact of them cutting down trees is the extinction of the human race. This falls into the idea you get from Lowell that some of these things help us make our ends meet, right? That to the point where we are willing to cut down trees without destroy ourselves, we do not stand to identify with that, right? But to the point where preservation of these trees helps us meet the ultimate goal, which is the preservation of the human race, we think we'd rather stand to preserve them. Notice that the historical context you get from opening opposition is out of place debate. Why is that the case, right? Because in the past, the only of human survival was through cutting down of those trees and like adverse climate change effects, right? We do not think in the present context we need to do those things because we have ultimate or other means of survival. But secondly, because doing that directly harms the ultimate goal, which is the continued survival of the human race. I mean, may protect the term, Angel, right? But then the last idea is that the natural impact or the natural result of anthropocentrism is the killing of the environment in the long run. Thus, human beings will also shoot themselves in the head by going extinct if we destroy the environment. Again, I've rebutted this exhaustively by telling you that one, we stand to gain more from protecting the environment right now than we stood to gain from protecting the environment 100 to 200 years ago. Panel, we tell you protecting the environment is aligned with the ultimate goal of human preservation, right? That means we need the trees, we need those things in order to continue to survive as human beings, right? But then lastly, the idea of what? Of one, there's unsustainable exploitation of these resources, and to the idea of carbon emissions. We tell you that firstly, in most instances where individuals are pressed to continue doing some of these things, it's because one, they have no alternative, right? Notice that someone between dying and cutting down the tree, individuals will choose to survive, right? Cut down the tree and survive rather than preserve the tree. And I think we stand to adopt or to justify that radical stance from side closing government. Why do we run past the panel? Because one, we tell you we stand to do anything and everything to ensure the continued survival of human race so that we don't go extinct like dinosaurs. But then secondly, we tell you in a world where we choose not to prioritize human beings, we are more likely to go extinct and leave the environment. Exactly. For lions, for snakes, we do not think so, and we are more than glad to take on a more radical stance from closing government to the point that one, it helps us to ensure the continued survival of the human race. We have never been proud to propose. Thank you.
All right, we thank the government whip for that speech. And with that in mind, I now call upon the final speaker of today's debate round, the lovely Denise, to come and give us the closing whip speech and in so doing conclude today's debate for us. Here. Please just introduce yourself once more and give us a countdown for timing purposes. Thanks.
Okay, so am I audible?
Yes, you are audible. Could you just speak a little bit louder so that you're more audible on our end as well?
Okay, so sure. I'll begin in the next 5 seconds. Let me just collect myself. And I think, well, yeah, shout out to the legendary Bin Rumors, Becky Lee. James, you'll be fine. So I'll begin my speech in 3, 2, 1. Panel, at a point that actually CG comes and runs a case that is out of coexistence outcome, then we think that is a time they lose the debate, right? Notice that what happens in the case of CG is that they just run an outcome of existence, right? It is just like a consequence of coexistence, right? Means that this, how don't we justify anthropocentrism in this case, right? Notice that what happens when someone is above the hierarchy, they do not have any right to actually oppress people who are below that hierarchy, right? So at that point, we think that what happens in that case scenario, we cannot have like something like, because humans are like at the top, they do not have the right or they do not have that privilege to actually sort of like dominate these animals and oppress them, right? So at that point, that is where we think that actually CG and OG all fall out, right? Because they do not show us that actually having that privilege is synonymous to actually oppressing these things, right? But also secondly, going into this, notice that what happens in the world of anthropocentrism is a world where there is some humans lack understanding, right? So what happens is that they do not have the right, like they do not have the privilege to differentiate between what is legitimate and illegitimate in the case of human beings, right? So in that case, that brings me to what James tells you. James in his speech tells you that this is going to be detrimental because they are at the top, right? So how this becomes detrimental is the fact that there is some sort of survival, like a societal survival that is going to be threatened, right? So when it is threatened, we think that it is like sort of a relationship between the animals and the human beings, right? So for them to survive, we think they need that interdependence to continuously exist, right? But guess what Lawel and Fortunate say? They just come and say, you see, we think we need to survive because this is like a sort of urgency or anything. We think that even bats causing like COVID is still bad in itself, right? So when they cause COVID and you want to depend on them as a means of human aid, then we think that that would be detrimental in the long run, right? But engaging CG to its best, CG comes and talks about things like self-preservation or anything, right? So this is the point where I tell you that you see in its own self, James tells you that we sort of need these animals, or we sort of need of this moral obligation for them to reproduce and gain that value, right? So this happens in a case scenario that because you cannot relate to something, or because you cannot sort of talk to someone or anything, then we think that you do not have the right to actually oppress them, right? That is why we tell you that actually sort of these animals or the environment sort of have their own rights, or they sort of have their own life, right? So in its own self, we get that sort of moral obligation to sort of protect them because of the interdependence that exists, right? So notice that in a world where we opt into OG and CG, even when they talk about urgency, then that is a world where we're going to
from
threaten.
CG.
I'll take in the next minute. That is where we threaten the survival of humanity in its own self, right? Because at the point that you have to depend on this, then it becomes problematic in the long run. I'll take CG. Lawel? Okay, so I'll just go on. So what happens in the end is that we sort of require like, yes, we have what they are running is a case that is actually existing, right? Like the outcome where we need to like get meat from these animals or species or anything. We think that that exists, right? But at the point that you actually become anthropocentrism, it is one thing that is going to be detrimental to climate change solutions, but also secondly, is going to be detrimental to the survival of humanity. But thirdly, we think that this is like a life support system, right? Where humans sort of survive on these animals, right? But also going into the case of OG, you see, OG comes with this hilarious case that you see, when we give animals rights, then that is at a point in time where we allow them to roam on the streets or anything. We think that our opening already took up this when they told them that about the environment, actually the deforestation that is occurring or anything out of human activity is the one that is making this, right? But we think that in its own self, recognizing human rights, it is a point that you recognize the value of them, right? So on an analogy, notice that what happens, like for example, the whites have understanding, they sort of have that intrinsic value to harm the blacks, right? Which brings about racism. But that does not justify that they are at top of a food chain, right? So that is the same thing we're telling you, that just because you are at the top, just because you have the rights, does not necessarily mean that you have to oppress something, right? So we think that on that thin line, we rank higher than our opening, right? Because we show you that in its own self, it is not justified just because you have that privilege or you have that dominance or you cannot relate to something, that then you have the right to oppress that something, right? But also moving on, secondly, where do you get a world of sustainability? Because this has been a clash throughout, right? So notice that in a world that we opt into OG or CG's case, it is a world that we are going to come to like take away this animal. I'll take you. Dion, I'll take you. Dion? Okay, so I'll go on in 3, 2, 1. So panel, we think that what happens in a world of CG will show you that world is actually something that does exist, that's something we all have to buy into. It does not become anthropocentrism in its own self, right? But also secondly, in a world where we do not have escape from mankind or environment is not protected, then that is a world where we're going to have some sort of it's going to be detrimental to society, right? But also thirdly, we think that you need to also notice the limited resources that are actually existing, because anthropocentrism in its own self actually says that humanity is supposed to expand, or human beings are supposed to produce and go on, right? So what that happens in the long run is that you're going to get people depending on something that is lower, like the limited resources are low, but besides that, survival is going to be threatened because you do not have anything that is going to sort of make them survive in the long run, right?
Okay,
but also thirdly, I will take you.
OG already engages why interest of animals is in the interest of us, because that also achieves anthropocentrism. Secondly, we cannot talk about morality of animals because they aren't self-aware. We talk about preservation of animals and survival. Because CO does not have an extension and a derivative CG is why OG is for the win.
Okay, so Pano, I think then that is the problem where anthropocentrism does not exist on their own side, right? So their characterization and contextualization in the end of it all, it does not benefit them, right? Because what they do is to protect only animals that they will need in the long run, right? So what that does, it is going to disrupt the ecosystem, just like we tell you, right? So when that happens, then we think that they're only going to save the animals they have. But intrinsically, we tell you that what happens is that human beings in themselves, they are selfish or they are greedy, right? So that is a point in time where they are not really going to differentiate between what is legitimate and illegitimate. That is going to sort of protect the other human needs or the human interests, right? So even when they are protecting their own species, then we think that it's going to be problematic because you give them that sort of hierarchy, right? So when that happens, then we think that OG does not actually debate what anthropocentrism is, but they debate some other different world where they want actually to coexist ecosystem, right? But also going on, when they come and talk about self-preservation and survival, we think that is best gotten in our own side, right? Because we show you, why do we win? Notice that actually animals and humans have an interdependence, that's symbiosis, right? But also secondly, we think that it's not justified just because you're the top of the food chain, it's not justified to actually oppress the others, right? But also thirdly, we show you how it is necessary for survival of society.
And we thank the closing whip speech, Denise, for that speech. And that brings us to the end of this lovely debate. We thank you all for the heated engagement, the insight into different issues, and of course, the intellectual approach to dealing with issues concerning environmental sustainability and the progression of humanity. It was quite a heated round, and the winner will obviously be decided after my panelists and I go and deliberate. So panelists, if you're listening in on this, I think could you join me in one of the Discord rooms? Let's meet in Discord room 3 so that we can deliberate, and the announcement of the winner will be announced during the award ceremony. Once again, thank you to all teams, all members, all participants for being here. No, of course, I wasn't just going to announce the results. Thank you very much to the organizations involved in putting this debate together. It has been a rough but amazing run up to this final moment. Thank you to those engaged in public speaking and poetry as well, making it a more wholesome approach to the issues that we've been debating. Thank you to the organizers. Thank you to the CAP team. Thank you very much, especially to ORCOM and TAB as well. I know a lot of us had issues with check-in, registration, tournament settings. Yeah, it is new technologies that we're dealing with in terms of online tournaments. So we do know there were mishaps here and there with speaking challenges and so forth. But once again, we've made it to this point and we've had what I would like to believe is a successful tournament. So teams, you may do the equivalent of crossing the floor to shake hands. And thank you to everyone, even those Molly in absentia, our CA, for running around, having sleepless nights to ensure that the tournament run smoothly. Once again, all protocols observed. Thank you to our observers, and of course, to the main stars of the show and the reason we're here to begin with. Thank you to all the debaters who love giving us intellectual arguments and throwing shade. We appreciate and love you as you are. I will now move on to deliberate with my panelists in room 3 Discord. Thanks.
All right, thank you very much, Daliso. It was amazing. I at some moment felt like I should chip in. I like we should have in the traditional way of debate by even us who are seated in the stand and observing much as it's an online one would have chipped in. It has been really amazing, and listening to these young comrades sharing such ideas was something that we all admire. And everyone, I remember when I was tell me that there is a moment where I use the microphone. If you have ever used a microphone when meeting, then you know that you have gotten into the league of legends, because it's always at tournaments that microphones are brought on the finals, and even now on finals we're able to use Zoom and like so it creates a distinction between a final and any other round. It was really old and one that we are proud to associate with. All right, we shall be going on with our normal schedule as the judges are heading in for deliberations and to come up who takes the day. Adjudicated, they will be going to Discord room 3. So every adjudicator who has been present, I am sure Mr. Daliso had already communicated to you. You're going to room 3 for more deliberations, and the result shall not be announced. Next on our agenda should have been public speech finals and poetry finals, but we already communicated as we were starting. So were the finals of public. So by now the finals of public speech are as well done, and as well the finals of poetry are done. None of the results shall be communicated now. Communication is exclusive to when we shall be having a virtual conference with all Uganda, with all global platforms, that the conference, the International Youth Day. And that is one of the activities that was part of honoring the International Youth Day, was this debate competition that we've had. So next in and the tournament data, we shall come back to me, then we shall be heading for a lunch break. Remember everyone, we must and we should be able to come back by 2:30 to join the virtual conference, where the award ceremony shall be held. So, Mr. Tournament Director.
Mahad, hopefully you have been able to share the link for the international conference.
Sure, I shared the link and I will reshare it in all groups immediately after here. I will reshare the link in all groups. It was already shared, but I will have to reshare it, and we should all attend the international conference like earlier had before this.
And I hope they did register in advance.
Yeah, sure. They must have registered because the link was shared earlier. But those who had not, I am actually going to share the link, reshare it again. A few minutes from now, I will share it in the WhatsApp groups of Jumuiya. So, Mr. Tournament, there we shall not be having, we shall not be teachers from public and poetry, since they already had their finals. As we're having a final here, so was public speech and poetry already did. Only are we waiting for the announcement. So, Mr. Tournament Director Clifton Iroka, Dr. Clifton Iroka, kindly come and address us, please.
I hope I'm edible because I've fallen out of the meeting about twice. So
Yes, you are, sir.
thank you very much. I'm glad that the economy in Uganda has made it possible for me to make it to this meeting until this time. Well, good morning to you all in your respective capacities, respecting protocol from the Manager Global Platform Uganda to the rest of the participants, members of the OGCOM and the CAP team. It's been a long while since we started the organization of this very tournament. I think those are about 4 months ago. And although we carried it from last year, since it was a successful event, we thought it wise to have it again because the objective of having many youth in the African continent brought to understanding aspects of leadership, sustainable development goals, and fighting for a region which has a recognition of what the youth can put in the development of their own states is not yet achieved, and that's why we as well have this tournament for this year. Well, I will start in relation to these of children and young people down there dealing with the harsh environments, due to climate crisis. They have food shortages, they have failing social conditions on the ground, and they also are not certain about how their future will. And it drives us situation where problems like the pandemic plus now. The that have been risen throughout all the have all been around such a conversation on how best we can devise sustainable solutions to solve such a problem that most of the youth especially have faced in the particular the Eastern Southern Africa region. We're here to talk about sustainable development goals because when you look at food, all the and health, because COVID-19 falls under health, all these are aspects that have been catered for under the sustainable development goals. But we need to recognize that the environment, and that's where I want to base on to have my say about what has been going on. In case even after this discussion, these engagements that we've had, we still fail to achieve the goals related to climate action, and life on land, like we've had the previous motion, the world will fail to achieve all other remaining goals. The eradication of poverty, us having zero hunger, we've been debating about food security, us having peace and justice. Last year we debated about education, good health, just there are quite a number of things that I can talk about. All these are goals that affect our lives every day. And we can only save them through protecting the environment because it's one of the most important requirements for social justice and economic development. And, if we ensure the rights of the youth around the world and include them in decision-making processes, we probably might come up with better and sustainable solutions because they are the future of tomorrow. Actually, today, I like to say today because we are now living in the generation of the youth. I am happy that in Zimbabwe, actually the government involved young people in the production of the country's climate policy document. How I wish the rest of the states in Africa took that up, because they've had plans, although, but now, and their plans are actually becoming actions slowly. They are here, they came with activists achieved as a collective activity through a collective push to a certain level. So I feel that matters regarding climate change, food security, and COVID, or any pandemic that would arise, we have been given an opportunity to start from, to raise our voices, to put into question the government, in the different countries that we are in, so that we see them taking action to save our own future. Because without us taking action now, it means we shall have run out of time by the time we think of, calling them to come into action. Otherwise, as I speak here today, I wish to thank all of you for having decided and chosen to participate in this year's Jumuiya tournament. And I request all of you to join in for the virtual conference that will start in about an hour and a half from now. Register through the link that we've shared via the different platforms for the International Youth Day Conference. And that's where we shall as well have our winners from this tournament for all tracks. That's debate, public speaking, and poetry being rooms. And we promise you that your data refund and certificates will come through right after, as we've been communicating to you. I thank you all, and I wish you the best ahead. Over to you, Protocol Director.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clifton. And that was good from you. We've had this meeting and we've ended exactly 17 minutes to noon. That implies we've ended before the time we intended to end much earlier. And as well, it leaves us with an opportunity of having a longer lunch break. A longer lunch break implies that we shall be able to connect and join the conference much earlier as expected, because we shall have a lunch break that takes more than 2 hours. So therefore, we shall expect you to keep time, and by 2:30, we should be in the conference. Honorable ladies and gentlemen, once again, we thank you all for gracing the Jumuiya tournament, and we promise to make it good. But yes, we've delivered better. Let's have you all at 2 p.m. and let's have you all by 2:30, and the link has been reshared and will be reshared again for those who have not registered to register, and for everyone to be able to log in on time. Thank you once again from OG, wishing you all the best, and see you again at the reward ceremony. Thank you and good morning.